first of all, it's great to just reconnect with people who I met 50 years ago, and then to be able to reconnect. So it's wonderful to have that chance, and also a big appreciation for everybody who put this together, because it's just wonderful to, if people don't know, I'm Mitchell, Stuart's brother.
We know.
Along with my sister Rhonda. But again, I think we're so appreciative to everyone putting this together and everything that people are sharing, and just for us to continue to learn more about Stuart through all of this, and to, sort of all the appreciation. But I thought, as a family member, I'd just say a little bit when I, think about Stuart, think about the generations that led to Stuart. Because when I think about it, I'm not going to hold it together. I'm not so good. But it was. But it was like 100 years ago that our four grandparents, they, all four of them came from Eastern Europe, fleeing persecution, and came without any money, without speaking the language, but wanting to make a better life for their children and grandchildren. And so I do think of them, and that they'd be very happy today if they were here, about the life that Stuart led, that we led. It also makes me reflect about others who are coming to the country now, fleeing persecution, not speaking the language, not with money, and don't necessarily have the opportunities that my grandparents had, that opened up the possibilities for Stuart and Ron and myself and for others. And then for my parents, I think it's great. Others have mentioned some things about my mom, and I think my mom and my dad, created an incredibly loving, caring household, and encouraged the curiosity, and always sort of put a high value on learning. I was going to say put a high value on education, which is true, but I think Stuart didn't put such high value on education, more on learning. His traditional education, there are a lot of things he had troubles with, but he always had a high value of learning, and I think that's not now. So I think all of us benefit a lot from growing up in an environment, and I think we see that Stuart in the stories that are told about Stuart, and you see the caring that came from our growing up, and the curiosity, and the always learning new things, which was part of growing up. We all benefit from. So although we all grew up there, we also had differences. And I one time remarked that, sort of Rhonda is the oldest child, and she in some ways followed in my father's footsteps and became a lawyer like my father. And I followed, and my mother was an educator. We heard her, she was a substitute teacher and a teacher, and I became an educator, so I followed my mother's footsteps. So my sister and I sort of took the two niches, and Stuart had to find his own path, and boy did he have one. And I do think for me that's a really defining thing about Stuart, that I think a lot of people also call it, he finding his own path and doing something, finding what was right for him. And of course sometimes the things that were right for him, it was challenging for others. When he went off to India, that was really hard on my mom, the hardest thing in her life. But it also, as much as it caused so much heartache for my mom when Stuart went to India, when Stuart came back and years later, Stuart has a strong relationship with my mom than I think Rhonda and I did. So that caring side of Stuart, was always there. And people talk about some of you probably went on cruises with Stuart and my mom, and he went gambling with Stuart and my mom, and so he sort of connected with her in ways, even though he had his own way of being and the different my mom's way of being, but there was that caring side of Stuart, and I think we saw that all of the time, and even sometimes, and people have made some reference, and it was a challenge for me. His political views went in directions that were very different from mine, and that was really hard for me to deal with. But then I'd always value the caring side of Stuart and his interactions with people. My nephew Ben, who's not here, but Stuart had such a special relationship with Ben that we see that, and it means so much to us. Stuart connected with Ben, and they would tweet about Survivor. And I think it was sort of like this really special relationship he had, and that was sort of the special side of Stuart. And I think in listening to what everyone's saying, and I was saying about Stuart, one thing that came through my mind is, as some of you know, one thing that I've done in my work is I developed this software called Scratch where kids can create their own animated stories and games. I worked together with my friend Natalie, and I worked on this. And millions and millions of kids who created projects, but one project is my favorite of all time. It was made by an 11-year-old who actually, he was talking about the challenges that he was on the autism spectrum, and so the challenges he faced, and the people didn't necessarily understand the fact that he was different. But he was sort of saying, it's good to be different, and the world would not be an interesting place if everyone was the same. And then he ends the project as the way to be happy in life is you be you. So we often say that in our group. We say, you be you. And Stuart lived his life, you be you. And he respected other people, you be you. And so for me, that was sort of an important part of Stuart. And he lived his life with you be you, and he found a way that was meaningful to him and helping other people be you as well. Thank you.